Greetings. It's Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Um, so, what I wanted to share with you today comes from Craig. He was with his wife Sheila and their two young daughters. They were out by Johnstone Bay, which is kind of the middle ground between Prince William Sound and Gulf of Alaska, right? So, they were out on their boat, just recreationally, and they were doing a little bit of rock fishing and some other stuff like that. Just family time, right? This was last year, 2023. It was early August, so a little over a year ago. Anyway, so they're out there, they're doing the fishing thing, and they're near Johnstone Bay, and the weather started picking up. So, according to what Craig said, Sheila, his wife, was getting kind of nervous with their daughters on board. It was rocking a little more than she had liked. So they headed inland just to wait out the storm, and they were out for a few days anyway, so it was no big deal. Well, as they're getting closer to shore, there's this little Johnstone Bay where they're pulling into, and there's a river that leads back to Johnstone Lake, right? And it's a very large lake. Well, as they were getting closer to shore, Craig said that they saw some what they thought were people kind of going back and forth on the beach, and they were looking around for a boat, and there was none, right? So they were like, well, geez, maybe these people like are trapped here. Maybe they need rescuing, so let's go check on them, which is the Alaskan thing to do. People in distress, fellow Alaskans, immediately jump in. Unless they're just a POS, then they need to go away. But anyway, so they're on a rescue mission basically in their mind's eye. They're heading towards shore. He's making sure he's not going to run aground. He's very studious when it comes to safety. So Craig said as they were approaching, they noticed as they got closer, he had an air horn, and he started airing the air horn, getting these people's attention, letting them know, hey, we're coming. So he gave 3 short blasts, burp, 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 and as he was heading in, and the closer they got, Craig said these people fled the beach and went up into the brush. And for the life of him, he couldn't understand it because he saw at least 3, right? And so as they get closer and closer, he decides, okay, this is close enough. He didn't want to run aground and all that. A very expensive boat. And so he stops, he drops anchor, and he gets the dinghy down, and the little, 9-horse or 10-horse outboard, whatever they had, threw it on there, grabbed his firearm, grabbed first aid kit, water and some food, and puttered on in. Now, you got to keep in mind, there's a storm moving in behind him, and so they're fairly protected. The swells aren't so bad there. Sheila feels a lot more comfortable, so she's waiting on the boat with the 2 girls. And the girls, by the way, were under 10, and we'll just leave that out of it. So they both had air horns, and because the walkie-talkies they had, the batteries were dead. So what they decided to do is they worked out, okay, 1 blast, I'm on my way back, 3 blasts emergency, call for help, whatever. Well, they had this all pre-planned out many times over, right? So what ended up happening is he starts into shore. Now, when he's getting closer to shore, he keeps looking back at the boat and the storm coming, because he didn't want to get caught in this little dinghy, but he wanted to get to shore and see if these people needed help. Well, from what Craig said, as he kept looking back, he started getting a real strange feeling the closer to shore he got. And he said he couldn't explain it. He said he felt like he was going to need rescuing, which seemed real weird because he's sitting there just simply going to check on some people, and he's not understanding why they fled into the woods, right? So all this stuff is going on, and he's trying to kind of, basically figure it out on the fly, like what's causing it, what scenario has these people hiding, are they okay, are they safe, all this stuff. He gets to shore, and as soon as he jumped out and pulled the dinghy up so the water wouldn't wash it away and stuff, and he tied it off around a medium-sized boulder. He said he grabbed his rifle and his trauma pack and started hollering, "Hey, hey, come out, come out. I'm here to help. I'm here to help." And he's looking around and he comes across some of the tracks on the gravel beach and whatnot, gravel, sand, and what have you. He said when he got up over there and started looking at the tracks, he was dumbfounded at how large they were. Uh, Hairy man, Sasquatch, all that was not even in his wheelhouse. Uh, Craig is a professional man and very, you know, uh, straightforward, like no time for nonsense kind of guy. Very serious. And so he's examining these prints, and he watched these things, these people make these tracks. He watched them walk and then flee off into the brush, right? And so he's looking, and it's starting to dawn on him that these tracks are huge. He sat down, and his air horn can is approximately 8 inches tall, and so he kind of used the can as a marker, and it was one of the tracks was three of the air horns, another one was 3.5, and one was two. And so he's just like, holy crap. He realizes these are very, very large people, and he didn't feel comfortable anymore. They were barefoot tracks. He yelled out a couple more times just to check, right? So he said as he basically assessed the situation and realized he's dealing with something he has no clue about, he's paying attention to these tracks. He's trying to work through the scenarios in his head of what the hell's happening with these people. He said at that time he heard the air horn from his wife. And so he looks back at the boat, and she's just three blasts, three blasts, three blasts. Like so obviously she's really wanting his attention. He said that as he's trying to look back towards the boat, which is 100 yards away at this point, he can't make out what's going on. So he decides, I'll get out of here. He walks back over and he unties the dinghy and he's pushing it out. He said when he got in the dinghy and turned around and back and looked, that it looked like a very large brown mound down just back behind him. He said it was probably maybe 60 feet, maybe. And just out of nowhere, there's this big brown mound there. And he couldn't for the life of him figure out what he was looking at. He wasn't sure if it was something he didn't notice when he first got there, like a piece of, basically erosion, a big clump of brown, dirt or whatever, just kind of washed up, because that does happen in certain places, and it looks shaggy and what have you. But then he saw it move, and it freaked him out because it was massive. He said he saw it move. It just, from what he could make out, was just a big brown mound at first, and it moved, and it kind of moved back and forth a little bit, and he was in shock trying to figure out what the hell he is looking at. Craig said that in that moment he realized whatever this is obviously alive, and it's way big, it's huge. He said it was like a Volkswagen going back and forth, and he said the way it was going back and forth was kind of sporadic. It would kind of jolt this way a little bit and then kind of jolt back this way, and he couldn't make out what he was seeing. So he's steadily pushing the boat out. He's unnerved, and he gets on the boat, and he turned around. He fires up the motor, and he goes in this small circle so he could circle around and look back, because there's no reverse on the little outboard. And so he does that, and as he's looking back at this brown thing, all of a sudden this thing stands up. He said when it stood up, it looked as wide as it was tall. He said it was humongous. He said it was over 10 foot tall, very, very wide, very like matted, like just almost like dreadlocks looking kind of to it, like a real dirty dog kind of look to it with long hair. And he was trying to figure out what in the hell he was looking at. And he said when it stood up, it wasn't facing him. It was kind of quartering away as far as how it was positioned. It was facing away from him at like a 45-degree angle. And he said he was in shock, so he kept going in the circle looking. And as he's doing so, back behind this thing, he noticed movement in the brush. And now he's super curious, like, what the hell is really happening here, right? Because what he said he saw seemed much larger than the three what he thought were people just moments ago when that caused them to come in here, right? He said as he's doing this and checking out this other movement, this thing let out a roar. He said it was like a mix between a lion, a bear growl, a woman being murdered, and just god awful guttural. Sounded like someone with a real bad chest cold at the same time. It was very powerful. He felt it vibrate the boat, and he was just in a little rubber dinghy, you know. And so he's like instantly turned around and started going back to the boat. Now, during this time, his wife is running out of her air horn. You know, she exhausted it, trying to get his attention to get him the hell back to the boat. She was freaked out. He gets back to the boat, and his wife and two daughters are scared. You know, they thought, you know, he was going to get eaten, because what he didn't realize is when he was checking out the tracks and measuring them with his air horn, this thing had come down the beach behind him and was basically kind of sniffing his tracks. Uh, she said his wife told him when he knelt down and was doing the measurements and she started blaring the air horn, it was to try to get his attention, and he would just glance back over his shoulder back at the boat, and he wasn't looking back behind him where she needed him to see what was happening. And she said it came out standing, got down on all fours, and then kind of started going back and forth. It looked like it was sniffing for something, right? And the only thing Craig could figure out is it was smelling his tracks, you know, trying to figure out what he was. And so as she's telling him this, he's trying to, like, did you see it? You know, he's looking around for a cell phone. He's looking around for, you know, something to record what he is seeing. They put their cell phones in one of those dry bags, and it was somewhere down underneath in the hold. And so he, you know, sent his daughters, hey, go find that dry bag so we can get my cell phone. I want to get some photos of this and try to record some of this. And his wife's like, let's just go. Let's just go. We can beat the storm. We'll head towards Seward. You know, we'll get, you know, somewhere else other than here right now. I want to go. And they're offshore. And so, but she's really freaked out because she thought she was about to watch her husband get eaten by, and essentially she thought it was a bear at first, but obviously it was no bear. And so his daughters couldn't find the dry bag with the cell phones, right? It ended up being hanging just inside where the little cabin is for this little cruiser, just inside on a hook, and they were looking everywhere else, and it was like right there in front of them. But anyway, so he pulls anchor, he circles around, and he heads towards shore a little bit more. And he didn't want to get too close because he didn't want to ground out or anything like that. But he said he got fairly close, and his wife started getting real mad at him, yelling at him, we got to get out of here. Because by this point, there was only a smaller one on the beach. And he said he was trying to get a better visual of this thing. And he said it looked like the arms were way too long for the body. The way it moved was very man-like but different. He said the torso was longer than the legs. The arms hung real low. And this thing, once he got to a certain point and turned, he was adjusting his outboards and adjusting them up. And it got to a point to where the exhaust started. Anyone been on a boat, you know what I'm talking about. So the exhaust got a little louder, and once that happened, this thing took off. It was gone. He said it disappeared into the trees so fast he couldn't even calculate how quickly it was going. It was just there, and then that noise happened, and it was gone. So with that, they headed away. They got up around the bend, and they heard another, and this was at a distance because they got up around the bend just out of Johnstone Bay, and he powered off and dropped the anchor again and was trying to figure out what their next move was. And at that point, when they were sitting there trying to figure it out, they heard another almost identical growl, howl, scream coming from basically the same area. And he said it was just so unreal. And I mean, you know, they headed off. They ended up going to Seward. But anyway, I want to thank Craig for being patient A lot of times there's other people that I'm in contact with, but I try to get all the details to share with you guys, so any sounds you can recognize. If you're in a similar situation, you can kind of figure things out. But anyway, I want to thank him for being patient. I want to thank him for getting back to me and for sharing with us. There's a lot more to come. I'm behind, like, because of how I do things. I talk to the people several times, and it's just what I do, just so I can accurately bring it to you guys. And I offer everyone, hey, you want to come on and tell it yourself, and a large majority, they default it to me, which is whatever. But I want to thank Craig and his wife. She didn't say much when I talked to her, other than she told me that she thought her husband was gonna get eaten in front of her and their daughters, and that's just a horrific thought. Anyway, but thank them. What else? That's it for now. I want to thank you guys for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next one.